Welcome to Industry Insights with Route Consultant, your front row seat to the fast-moving world of logistics and beyond. Each week, we bring you game-changing insights, real-world strategies, and fresh perspectives to fuel smarter investments and build stronger businesses. Join us as we sit down with expert guests to explore emerging trends and pressing topics across a wide range of industries. This is Industry Insights.
Lee and Keely Muse, it is a pleasure to have you in Houston. I'm actually on site with you all today, so thanks for coming out.
Yeah, great to be here.
So really, before we go into anything else, I'd love to just hear a little bit about how you ever even found FedEx. Before we get to where you are today, what was it that brought you to FedEx in the first place?
Yeah, so it started with my dad, actually. He was a FedEx contractor in the Dallas area.
RPS too? Is he from the beginning?
No,
Okay.
he's what we call a serial entrepreneur. And so he had several businesses throughout his life. He had a business that fell apart. And he was like, you know what, I'm just going to go to truck driving school.
Something consistent.
Yeah, I'm going to just, drive a truck for a while, figure out my next step. And he went from driving a truck to buying out his contractor within the first year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
While he was driving. So he transitioned pretty quickly.
Okay.
From there he started just, trying to get us to get into the business. He was pretty persistent.
The pitch at every meeting, at every family gathering.
Exactly. And for a long time I was like, I don't know anything about trucks.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about truck driving. That's not something I'm interested in. But eventually he kind of talked us into it.
Okay. So what was if you think back, what was the kind of final defining thing that finally convinced you to step into it?
I'd say the big thing was he ended up selling off some of his runs. And because, he talked about this over and over again. And we were like, okay, truck drivers, that's not really our lane. That seems a little scary and not in our wheelhouse. But he started selling some routes and brought in a pretty savvy investor. It was like, I've looked at all kinds of different businesses. I really like this model, really like the margins. There's a lot to like about it. We're like, okay, well, we believe this guy. He's like, what? I've been telling you this for years.
Yeah.
So that got our attention.
Okay.
And then Keely was kind of helping him on the back end with some things, kind of back office stuff, and things kind of rolled from there.
Yeah, Lee was in oil and gas, and we were kind of moving around from different locations for his job.
Yeah.
And then we started to have kids and kind of wanted, a little bit more stability. And
so you became an entrepreneur.
So exactly. So around that time, we were like, okay, we'll start looking into this a little bit more seriously. So we ended up buying 2 routes out of Dallas.
Okay.
And so that's kind of, how we got started.
So oil and gas, what was it when you think about what you did before that made you confident you could be successful in FedEx, besides just having an inside look at what it looked like?
Yeah, I just kind of drew a lot of confidence with just my dad being in the business, but did not have any background in that sort of thing whatsoever. Lee, being an engineer, he was a little bit more mechanically inclined than I am. But so that just kind of pushed us to start doing it.
Yep. Yeah, it pushed you into the stability of an exciting new industry.
Exactly.
Well, it was going to be a side gig by the way.
So that's how it started.
That was the convincing.
Yeah, it was like, it's going to be a side hustle.
One toe into this space.
For sure, So Lee maintained his job. And then, so I started with the 2 trucks. It was going to kind of be my thing, my side hustle while we raised kids. And then it evolved from there.
Yeah, okay. So, did you ever consider P&D, or was it Linehaul all the way? Because that's what you knew.
Yeah, it was Linehaul all the way. We started with 2 unassigned teams, and just kind of.
That is one of the hardest things to start with too. So
dove right in.
Got it.
Yeah.
Was your dad teams or was he solos?
He was a combination.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd seen them both.
I'd seen them both.
Yeah.
I knew how
Remember,
difficult
he sold
it was.
all the good stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you came in Dallas and you had some of the most complicated parts of the Linehaul space, and you had 2 of them, and you were trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
How did that go? How were those first few months?
It was tricky. It was tricky for sure. We started with those 2 teams, and then we were wanting to transition because we're based in Houston. So we wanted to be able to be closer to our operation at that time, and they were opening up the Houston hub. And so our plan was like, okay, well, take these 2 runs, maybe we can transfer them to Houston and then grow from there. And that's what we were able to do. To kind of be a little bit closer to what we had going on.
Yeah. So you just moved. So you did transfer them. How long after getting those initial?
We ran them for, I think, maybe about a year, maybe 9 months, and then we were able to get them transferred.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a too terribly difficult process because they were looking for contractors who wanted to kind of switch and help build up that hub. So we were able to transfer that pretty quickly.
Yeah, and at the time being new, we didn't realize like what a unique situation that was. It was
Yeah.
like a brand new hub. They're actually looking for contractors to transfer routes to the new hub. You know, we thought maybe this is something they did, you know,
you didn't
all
know
the
any
time.
better. Yeah.
And then, you know, looking back, we're like, okay, that was a huge
That was
opportunity.
a sweet
that-
situation
Yeah,
to
it was
step
very
into.
good opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
The ground level of a hub and just kind of walk in and be there as it grew. I assume that you didn't stay 2 runs for too long after that.
No, after that we grew pretty quickly. We're able to acquire some different runs there. And then it was about maybe, I guess, a year and a half in that I was kind of like, okay, like we've had a lot of growth now, and now I need some help. So I
Her little side business, you know, also being the mother of 2 small children at home. She's
Yes.
kind of like, you know about that job you're going to every day? Like, maybe you just shouldn't go there anymore.
Yeah.
So that's when we dove all the way in with 2 feet, and I joined the team and got to see what all the craziness was all about.
In those first few months after you quit your job and you are then joining FedEx too, did you like regret it, or were you?
There were a few terrifying moments in there. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah, because
what? You didn't tell me about this workers' comp bill, or like this and that. Like,
Yeah.
You know, there was a period for quite a while where we were just, you know, barely scraping by, barely making payroll,
Yeah.
and then it was like, you know, this isn't the stability that I
Yeah,
had before.
exactly.
And so it's a big transition to move into something like that.
because I think that's something people always worry about and may even underestimate when you're getting in as an entrepreneur. Like, you are setting the ground floor, you're setting your paychecks, you're setting your operations, and everything in your life is now dictated on how well you run your business. And that is a huge transition from a steady, constant paycheck from a corporation. So I think hearing that, one, you had those struggles early on, but kind of got through it, and then as we continue to talk about your story, I know how far you've gone from there. So I think it is comforting for people to kind of hear about you can start with one toe in and be in those terrifying situations early on, and you will be almost certainly.
Yeah.
But there is a light at the end of the tunnel there.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of new people come into the space. We've worked with some new contractors in various ways, and it's like no matter how prepared somebody thinks they are, obviously the more events you can go to, the more networking you can do, just general education knowledge as much as you can, but you're never fully prepared until you step in, and it seems like 6 months to a year is a struggle for everybody.
Yeah,
that
first year.
First
I mean,
year's
that's where
tough.
most small businesses fail, is in that first few years. So, when did you feel like you'd run out of your dad's knowledge? That was really your foundation coming into it. And where did you go next? Like, where did you try to figure out, okay, how can I learn how to be successful in this space?
Yeah, it was hard for a while. There really wasn't that many opportunities when we were getting started. I feel like the culture has shifted since then. And at that time, I was trying to talk to other contractors, reach out to other people and be like, what do you do for maintenance? What do you do for this? And people weren't really offering a whole lot of information. It was really once we started going to there was the first route consultant event that we went to, and we're able to kind of network and talk to some people who are willing to share information, that we were like, okay, now this is helpful. Now we're kind of learning a little bit more. So that was super helpful for us. And now I think that things have shifted, and there's a lot, there's a social
More
media
openness.
presence. Yeah, absolutely. Social media, things like that, where we feel totally comfortable reaching out and have really good relationships with the other contractors in our business or in our hub area, and then also in other hubs as well.
Yeah, and some of it's just the comfort of, this is the way I do it. Am I crazy? Like, are
Yeah,
you also
exactly.
doing it this
Are you
way? And
doing
it's
the same thing?
Okay, this is the same problems that we're all experiencing.
Yeah.
So, you dipped your toe in, then you jumped all the way in, both of you. Where was kind of the growth journey from there? What happened next?
So we started to expand quite a bit through COVID. So 2021, we really expanded. At that time, we were in Dallas and Houston, and from there we moved out to Nashville and Memphis and Montana, and really kind of spread out a lot.
How hard was that, even emotionally, to go from I feel comfortable in Houston, now I have trucks on the other side of the country that I don't even know where they're dispatching from, much less where they are right now.
Yeah.
Like, how did you get over that hump?
Yeah,
I mean, and we got kind of there in baby steps
Yeah.
because, you know, Dallas was the next one. We had moved down
Yep.
from Dallas to Houston. And then once I came on full time, her dad was like, good, I'd like to retire. So we worked out something with him to take over what was
He
left
had his
there.
end goal in sight and he
Right.
achieved it. Yeah.
the whole time he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, that was kind of the baby step, the stepping stone to say, okay, that's now 4 hours away. How are we going to manage that, especially only having a few tractors up there? Of course, she made that my job to make plenty of road trips, tearing up 45 in between Houston and Dallas, checking on things and checking in there for quite some time. But that kind of helped prepare us for, okay, it is possible, you know, especially once we started getting help in place at that location and others, to be like, okay, find the right people, get somebody on the ground, even if it's 4 hours away or halfway across the country, you know, you can still find a way to manage it.
Okay. And you said find the right people. What was the right person for you? Like what made you comfortable early on with putting somebody out on the road that you're not going to get to see or talk to that often, and had to count on them for your revenue?
Yeah, no, I mean, we definitely, you know, there is some strategy that goes into that and finding those right people, you know, when it comes to recruiting and things like that. But it does make it more difficult when they are that far away. So we were in the beginning making lots of trips out to, you know, when we started in Nashville, we were going out there quite a bit and, you know, trying to find the right person and the right manager and the right drivers.
And were your managers, did you promote them from internally or did you bring somebody in externally?
We've done a combination of both. Our, you know, Houston and Dallas managers we promoted internally, but then when we started up in some of these other places, you know, we just kind of had to go in there and start hiring people right away. It wasn't as much of being able to hire.
Yeah,
the business.
you're trying to make it happen however you can. You have to make 10 people appear.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Correct,
And you just
yeah.
got to keep moving and keep trying and
move quickly when you need
figure
to.
something out.
Yeah. So when you went from one terminal to multi-state, multi-terminal, what was kind of some of the biggest learning curves you ran into as you're trying to build a national business?
Yeah, we were surprised at how different in different markets, how the different hubs operate. Dallas and Houston actually operate pretty similarly, but then when we moved out to some other these places, the expectations were a little bit different than what we had been used to. So that was new, trying to learn everything about a new hub and how they like to operate, and then, you know, going on to the next place and then learning how they like to operate. And so it's not very cohesive.
Yeah. Was
So
it
that
just
was-
patience? Just making sure you didn't assume anything
Yeah,
and slowly
asking
learn?
all the right
Yeah.
questions and, you know, checking all the boxes.
And recruiting varied a lot too. You know, it's like what we saw in one market was completely different than what we saw in another market. And so that was, you know, obviously something we had to work through, try and figure out as we went through, because yeah, it's like, again, you assume what you know is just going to be the same everywhere, and we found out very quickly it's not, and it can be a lot more challenging, rates can be different, you know, a lot can change from market to market.
Yeah. And for as much as you like to think that there are black and white rules that apply everywhere, there's so many little gray nuances that completely change how each individual terminal and hub operate. It's one thing when you're coming in for the first time, you just assume you don't know anything, but when you've got, you know, some history in an area and you think you know how everything works, and then
Right,
suddenly
and then
they're like,
it's-
yeah, actually the rules are completely different over
Yeah.
here. And it's, how is that possible?
It
It's all
can be
FedEx.
very
but-
frustrating, for sure.
I
Yeah.
think as you continue to grow, patience continues to be an important virtue to
Absolutely.
stand on.
Yeah.
So how did it change the rest of your business? You know, beyond, did you add any different positions that you didn't have before? Now you don't just have drivers and managers. Did anything have to change with scale there too?
Yeah, absolutely. We had to kind of change just from like a technology standpoint. So, you know, in the beginning, I was like putting all of, you know, payroll in manually, and, you know, we were doing QuickBooks online, and it would just time out because we had started to get so many drivers that I couldn't get through all the numbers. So we actually kind of had to like pivot, and we ended up creating something ourselves where we could be able to do the payroll and, you know, take the FedEx settlement and turn it into something that could work for us in a, you know, relatively quick time.
Was the trigger point? Was it payroll? Was that really the big point where you're like, I got to figure something out beyond just QuickBooks?
For sure, yeah, that was a huge pain point for me.
Yeah, and even before to get the numbers for QuickBooks, you know, just breaking down the settlement, breaking it down for each driver. And then, you know, we found, like, from a recruiting retention standpoint too, like the more transparent you can be with the driver about exactly how their pay was breaking down. You know, we got calls over again like, hey, are you guys hiring? I'm at Contractor X over here. Like, well, what's the problem there? It's like, well, he's not paying me. Like, my pay's not right, this and that. And it's like, well, it may or may not be, but it sounds like you don't know for sure at the end of the day. So we were real key on getting that transparency to the drivers. Originally, that was just sending them a spreadsheet. You know, now, that's evolved to something a little better than that. But yeah, having that transparency to the drivers went a long way for retention of the drivers too, and trying to keep them. But yeah, the other piece of that is getting it processed quickly. Because as contractors, you get your settlement Tuesday night. Depending on what payroll processors you might have to have that in, Wednesday afternoon or something a lot of times. So that doesn't give you a whole lot of time to get it processed, get it ran through, get it correct. If you want feedback from the drivers especially, and then still make your payroll cut off. So
yeah. And all of those problems multiply the more drivers you have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's when it became painfully obvious that we needed some more tools.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys started to develop kind of an internal platform, and did it stick to payroll? Is that kind of where you left it? Is that the only thing that you were trying to solve for?
I mean, we did it. It was mainly payroll for a while, but then, as we started to, find different needs within our business, it was like, oh, this might be able to work for this too. And then I guess maintenance was the next step.
Maintenance, some things with settlement adjustments, same process over and over again for settlement adjustments. And the other thing we found out there was, okay, just because you submitted a settlement adjustment, you're not done.
Yeah.
Because then you got to figure out if you actually got paid for that adjustment
Correct.
or not, which can be a process to track. So yeah, we just gradually started adding more and more pieces. Talking about being remote locations, one thing we really liked was having like a pre-trip process so we could see when the trips came through, and we tried all kinds of things before we built the tool where back when there was paper hook sheets, send me a picture of your paper hook sheets, send me a picture of your safety chains and all that. And then, we tried sending it, they could text it to a number that would then go to our inbox. But then, as those, it's like, okay, now we got to go through all this and try and keep track of it. So we added that in, but having like that visibility and documentation to say, okay, I know that pintle hook's latched. I know those safety chains are on when our trailers are leaving the yard.
Yeah. And
then
recording it and having it where you can check it later.
Yeah, absolutely.
And make sure that they actually checked it.
Yeah.
So it all kind of started to roll into kind of one pane of glass where you're putting all of that information. And I assume in the beginning it was just focused on solving your own internal problems.
Absolutely, yeah.
And when it came to maintenance, was pre and post trip kind of the main things, or was it also ongoing maintenance too?
Ongoing maintenance. So even before the pre and post trip, it's like, okay, let's help find a way to track our PM schedule or tire rotations or anything else like that we wanted to do.
Got it. So what size were you when you realized that this is like, we can't do it on our own anymore? Like, when was the first time?
Yeah. I mean, it was a gradual process. I feel like we were probably over, 20, 30 drivers when I was like, okay, this is a lot.
Too many.
But I think I waited too long too,
Yeah. I think that's a problem
Yeah.
in general in this space, but just entrepreneurs in general. The idea is always, I am the final decider of my success. So if I'm struggling, I'll just do more.
Yeah.
I just will spend more hours on this, when often you can pay a vendor or have a technology do more than you ever can do just by investing more and more hours.
Exactly.
And then you also get to sleep, so that's nice
That
too.
is a plus, yeah, for sure.
Well, it was tricky too, because at the time there weren't many tools out there or any that we knew of to do that kind of thing. So it's one thing to know you have a problem, but it's another thing to try and figure out how to solve it, especially when you don't have a technical background. So we kind of got lucky, having somebody internally that knew those systems, and we were just like, make me a fancy macro spreadsheet.
Yeah,
he just kind of laughed at us.
At the time, you're just like, put some
Yeah.
extra formulas in a spreadsheet, and hopefully that'll solve at least half of my problems.
Right. And he
Yeah.
was like, I think we can do better than that. And that's
And
kind
he
of how it
was
all
right.
started.
Yeah.
Okay. So at that point, you've kind of built something that you're like, this is helping us tremendously. When was the point where you decided to turn around and see if maybe anybody else wanted to use it?
Yeah, I feel like I kind of had been talking to some contractors that had reached out. One of them just saw a recruiting listing, and he was about to sign up for the same terminal, so he was like, okay, I'll call this contractor, and he probably called several, but I ended up talking to him for quite a while, and he said, yeah, that was really helpful. I'm supposed to start here in the next few months. So he was doing some good upfront research, reaching out and doing things like that. So there's some people like that along the way that I kind of had those conversations with. I was like, okay, well, maybe could kind of start a separate business to branch out, maybe do some consulting, things like that, or if people, are trying to evaluate their business or different things. And then that's when, it's like, okay, well, if we're going to branch out, we might as well take the software piece with us and put it all together. So that's kind of how that happened.
And so at that point, was it just the technology, or had you actually created Forward Air Solutions already, or?
So that was Forward Air
Yeah.
Solutions.
Yeah, okay.
And then we kind of added the technology piece from there. Yeah.
Okay, so as you tried, obviously it helps knowing that if it was a problem for you, it's probably a problem for a lot of people that you're trying to solve. But was there, a lot of reception early on? Like, what was the kind of momentum as you're trying to explain it to people?
Yeah, obviously it rang true for a lot of people to say, yeah, payroll's killing me, or I want more visibility over my finances, my maintenance, and you're telling me I can have it all in one place instead of going and paying 3 or 4 different vendors to do the same thing. So yeah, that was, I feel like we got a great response from it, because a lot of people were looking for something really similar.
Yeah. And so when you think about once you added that technology to your own business, how, beyond just saving you time, like how did that change how you were able to manage and grow what you were doing internally?
Yeah, I think having, those technology pieces, that allows you to then not spend your whole day in the weeds, then you can kind of focus on bigger things. You can focus on growth. You can focus on, like, okay, where are we going to go next, and, what that looks like, or just optimize your business.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a huge piece for us to be able to kind
pull
of
yourself out of the weeds.
Exactly, and be able to kind of, survey a little bit, take a little bit better inventory of your business.
Yeah, just kind of monitoring things, saying, okay, which routes are doing better for us, which ones are more profitable, which trucks are just eating us on maintenance for whatever reason. Things that, if it's slowly happening over time, it doesn't stand out as much, but when you can step back and look at the numbers, you're like, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Time to let that truck go, or things like that, or if you're looking, to maybe do an acquisition, you're like, okay, this is similar to these routes, or I can look at the numbers here and just kind of process that stuff faster and have more visibility over, that situation.
Yeah, so you've pulled yourself out of the weeds. How has that changed the way you think about the types of routes or the types of areas that you want to grow into? Has it given you a different perspective, and how do you think about things now as opposed to when you were moving from Dallas to Houston because you were close to home?
Yeah, no, I think before, and too, like there was a lot of growth happening in FedEx.
Yeah.
And so, they were, passing out more routes than maybe they are now, And so at the time I was like, oh yeah, we can grow. I'll go here. And now we're a lot more thoughtful after, going to some different locations and maybe not being thrilled with operations there. Now we're like, ask a lot more questions and maybe do a little bit more research when it comes to, the market area and things like that. And then just having better conversations with the management in those areas and knowing the questions to ask. So like being in this business for a while now, we, have a little bit more experience when it comes to that sort of stuff.
So what types of markets, what types of runs are kind of your ideal now? Where do you like to grow?
Well, so we had moved out to all of those different locations, and then we ended up selling off some of those pieces and then just coming back to Texas. We were, kind of spread ourselves pretty thin, and we still have young kids.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, maybe we are going to stick a little bit closer to home.
Okay.
So these days our growth is really focused in Texas.
Got it.
So we'd still like to continue to grow, but maybe just keep it closer to home these days.
Yeah, keep it in the same hub area basically.
Yeah.
And are you guys mainly solos teams? Like where do you find is kind of your fit after those initial 2 teams?
Yeah, so we're still mostly teams.
Okay.
We're mostly teams in Houston, and we're mostly solos in Dallas actually. So we kind of have a split. But we like it. It's helped with our fleet strategy too. Like we'll bring our new trucks into teams and then transition them over to solos, and kind of keep those trucks around a little bit longer. So for us, it's worked to have a good combination of both.
And just the scale with personnel was huge. It's like running 2 teams of, eventually without fail, 2 guys aren't getting along, 2 drivers aren't getting along. Now what do? You only have one other spot to put them and try them over there. So now it's like, okay, if somebody calls off, hey, I'm taking this week off, or had something come up, it's like, okay, well, you move to team, I'll move your partner to solo. We can kind of shuffle things around week to week, especially having that combination of teams and solos in both locations is helped quite a bit. And just the scale, like I said, with a certain number of teams, even if you're all teams, once you hit a certain point, it's a lot easier to kind of shuffle that stuff around and try and keep everybody happy.
Yeah, so beyond the shuffling, like I know a lot of people who struggle with teams. So where do you feel the biggest challenges are with teams, and how have you all gotten past those over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, like he was talking about, like the personnel issues is really been a big struggle for us. But I feel like it kind of comes in waves too with drivers. We've been lucky enough where we have a pretty solid foundation of people that have been with us for a long time. But, we do have those recruiting challenges where we're trying to get, teams, and it is harder to hire for teams than it is to hire for solos, because, these guys are putting their lives in, the hands of somebody else. And so it can be challenging.
Yeah, for sure. And, another thing on the teams, like for unassigned teams, the biggest thing on recruiting is what I figured out early on is, okay, people have different motivations. Some of them just want to show up for work and get back and have more family time. Other guys are trying to go get 7,000 miles a week and stay out for weeks and get the biggest check they can. So it's like putting those two different people together usually didn't work out. So that was a big thing we figured out early on. Hey, what are your motivations? Is it home time? Is it chasing money? And then we can kind of match people up accordingly, because when you don't, it doesn't work.
Yeah, because all of recruiting is ultimately there's a certain amount of therapists and psychologists you have to do, but it's even more when you're trying to figure out matchmaking.
Right, yeah.
and I feel like that ultimately dictates a lot of your success in terms of if those two people end up working together. And we hear people say, yeah, it's great if you put two family members together because they know each other, but two brothers can fight just as easily as two people who don't know each other.
Or a husband and wife.
Yeah,
We've had that
exactly.
too. So you just never know.
Yeah.
There's definitely a piece of matchmaking involved in running teams.
Yeah. And do you guys handle all of your recruiting yourselves? Do you have somebody who handles recruiting, or a vendor, or how have you guys handled it over the years?
Yeah. So, initially we started out doing it ourselves. That was one of the first line items that I gave Lee when he came on board. You were in charge of recruiting.
Wow, that's the one
I
she
know.
did. The easy
Right?
one. Yeah.
But it's evolved as we've gotten bigger over the years. We've used vendors. Right now we have an in-house recruiter. And so that's been what's worked best for us. He actually used to be a driver for us. And so he knows the ins and outs of our business. He knows what it's like to drive for our company. And so it was kind of a natural fit to have him kind of transition into that position.
Okay. So if you're thinking back, smallest you were was 2. What was the biggest you ever were? 50. So between 2 and 50, and where are you now?
We're about 40-ish,
Yeah.
42.
So, if exit ramp, size, location didn't matter, what would you say is kind of a perfect ideal size for your business, and located where?
So I think you need at least 10. I think that makes the most sense from a scale perspective, from, does it make sense for me to hire a manager? Does it make sense for me to implement all of these different technologies? Because some of them, depending on who you go with, it can be expensive. So for me, I would say at least 10.
Okay.
And I really like the Texas market. I'm a little biased, but it's been working for us.
And do you think 10 is the minimum before you would hire a manager? Or you think a manager makes sense earlier? Or?
I think it makes sense earlier, but it also depends on, the types of runs that you're running. But we've had driver or managers in places where we had less than that, but they were also driving significantly too. So maybe they were more of like a lead driver. So again, it just kind of depends on the market and what you have.
I feel like that hybrid role is good. If you're kind of on that bubble, can I afford a manager? Can I not afford a manager? It's like, okay, well, maybe you're driving this many days a week, helping maintenance checks, doing this and that. And then maybe, eventually, okay, you're more of backup on these days, but you still have a couple days, and kind of transition from, driver into full manager role.
Got it.
Is what's worked best for us. But the other thing we talked about is just the scale with being able to shuffle around personnel and all that kind of stuff is, when you're super small, that makes it more difficult.
Yeah. So, there's lots of things going on in the FedEx network today, between Express and metals coming, and it's not as big of an impact on Linehaul as it is on the P&D side, but in general, how are you feeling about FedEx and the future of FedEx and Linehaul these days?
In Linehaul, we definitely are staying positive.
Yeah.
I know FedEx throughout the years, they are always implementing kind of changes and things like that. But we're hopeful that the future includes FedEx Linehaul Contractors. We're looking to continue to grow in the company.
Yeah, I think the fact that you're looking to continue to grow is enough. That's kind of a signal that you've jumped in all the way. So at this point, if you were trying to get out, it's one thing, but you're still swimming. So I think that's all we can really do. And a lot of the things change. It's the constant with FedEx is that there will be change, and
Right.
it's just about continuing to play in the sandbox they give us, right?
Yeah.
They're a business, you know, they're trying to turn a profit. They're relying on the economy as a whole. So there's all those pieces at play. I think it's been good. You know, we try and attend as many FedEx events as we can, you know, it's hub forums, or, you know, they're doing the Orlando summits, and just any place we can get, you know, FaceTime with FedEx management. It's like, okay, sometimes you can kind of get a clearer picture of what they're doing behind the scenes, kind of put yourself in their shoes a little bit, and try and see what they're dealing with, what their ultimate goal is. So then you can say, okay, I think if we stay on this track, we're doing what we need to kind of support their mission.
So think back for me, you know, you guys have been here beginning to end. You've seen a big, you know, from super small to super large. Somebody's getting into the space or thinking about getting into the space for the first time. What are the things that you would really caution people or tell them to be thinking about to be successful if they're coming into FedEx as a linehaul contractor today?
Yeah, no, I think just kind of what we were talking about, going to the different events and things like that, reaching out to other contractors. I mean, Lee told the story of the guy who reached out because he saw our recruiting ad. You know, we've seen that quite a bit, and I think that's a really important thing for people that are getting into the space, to reach out to contractors, whether it's through social media or through Route Consultant or through any of those, you know, avenues, to be able to get support. Because like you said, like the first 6 months, a year, it's going to be hard, and no matter what business you're in. And if you can have that support system, then I think it's going to make your business better.
Yeah, you know, usually if you search enough, you can find some recruiting ads that, you know, give you what the rate is in that particular location. That's huge. I mean, everybody should be doing that. I'm surprised when I hear people say, well, I just relied on what so-and-so told me or something. And it's like, okay, well, there's a market out there. Go see if that makes sense, you know, and if you're prepared to pay that. So you got to know that walking in, and then just knowing, I mean, as much as you can about that particular location. Another thing we tell people is, like, if you're going to a LIM meeting, that's not a one-way meeting, right? So obviously you're there, they're going to interview you, but you should also be asking questions.
So,
hey, if I'm going to be on,
important.
if I'm going to be on unassigned rotation, how often are you guys calling? What are you expecting? What's the growth look like? You know, get some feedback from, you know, the hub or station when you're in that position.
I think that speaks to what you guys talked about before, of like, things were great in Dallas and Houston, and then we went elsewhere and things were different.
Yeah.
So really trying to get a sense for how this terminal runs things, because you will be spending all of your time with them.
Right.
They are the FedEx personnel that you are dealing with. There's not some ambiguous FedEx entity. It's this person.
Right, exactly.
so knowing how they run it and what they expect, I think is really important.
And to one of the big things was finding shops. So we realized in some locations it was better to have Volvo trucks, and other locations it was better to have Freightliner. It was just which truck we could get serviced. And so that was something, you know, as far as research goes, to kind of look into those sorts of things too.
Yeah. Do you guys have any preferences on make and model? Like what's I know everybody has their own.
Yeah, we got a pretty good relationship with Volvo. Found a good sales rep we've been working with for quite some time, and very technical. You know, it's also good to have somebody on the tractor sales side that understands FedEx. He's like, okay, I know all the safety equipment you need. I know, you know, the dimensions you need.
Yeah.
Also, I know about the pup trailers and how we got to set the fifth wheel back as far as we can so you don't tear up your mud flaps, and just little things like that that you're not going to know or even think to question when you're coming into the space.
Not at all. Yeah, if you're coming in, you're like, I think that I would ideally like a truck with low mileage.
Right.
So there's so many things that you learn, and it's just one of those things. We can't teach you everything. We can teach you as much as we can, but I think it comes back to what you guys said earlier, that you got to ask questions and find people that will pour into you and answer, because you're not even going to have the right questions for a while.
Right.
And so
for sure.
you got to find somebody who's ready to answer them once you're ready to ask them. If you were to think back, what do the first 6 months of owning a line haul business feel like for somebody who's trying to conceptualize it?
Drowning?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. So, I mean, it can be. I mean, it can feel scary. It can feel like you're underwater.
Maybe trying to run underwater or something
underwater.
underwater for sure.
But I just encourage people to, you know, keep going and look for help, ask for help, and try and get those resources so that, you know, you'll come out the other side.
And eventually you'll learn how to swim, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So anything like in those first 6 months, if you were going to point to the biggest problem that people often run into first 6 months to a year, to mentally prepare for? What would you say are like those big, like, oh, you know, middle of the night calls that have you up and worried for the next week, or a truck on fire? I know I have somebody who in their like first week a truck got set on fire. So things like that. Yeah. So like, what are the types of things that people don't even know to worry about, but are the real things that they need to be thinking about operationally in those first year?
I mean, we know how we get measured with FedEx, you know, safety, availability, service. So doing what you can to support those metrics. You know, I know usually when we go into a new market, we weren't going to be the lowest paying contractor. We wanted to find good drivers, know that we were going to have people available, try and get people that stuck around for a while so we could go in showing that FedEx, you know, show FedEx that we were going to be there. We were going to, you know, be on those run rotations and when we get called and things like that to, you know, let them know that we're for real, we're going to fill our spots. And so they look at you a little harder when there are growth opportunities down the road. So that's a big recommendation of mine. When, you know, if you're going into a new space or a new business, is like, you know, don't get too cheap on the pay, because, you know, just get started, get your feet under you. And then from there, you can kind of lean things out, make things more efficient from there.
Yeah. If you lose your drivers, you got nothing.
Right.
You don't get paid anything if there's no trucks on the road. So
Exactly.
you can be a little, at least early, figure out what works. And I think you said it earlier, but I mean, the fact that people don't even know what common rates are in there because they don't go search job ads that's the minimum.
Yeah.
That you should go do.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So when you're thinking forward air solutions at this point, you know, what are the biggest things people are coming in to talk to you guys about? Like where do you find the most success today when you're going out to new contractors versus when you first theorized it and kind of the market today?
Yeah, we just kind of saw, you know, first of all, what we wanted and then what other people wanted. It's like they just want to go to one place, log in, and be able to do everything from watching their finances, doing payroll, doing maintenance, doing their pre-trips, doing their scheduling, doing all the compliance stuff, the IVMRs, the IFTA, the MMRs, the monthly maintenance reports. So just trying to have everything in one place is, you know, the biggest thing that we sell people on. And then also, you know, if you can get everything in one place and you're not paying multiple vendors, you know, we can reduce that cost by quite a bit. Also, you know, we point out things like, I don't know how many times we're like, you know, we missed that FedEx didn't pay us for fuel for that tractor that week because it only got, you know, a handful of miles or whatever, wasn't enough that the driver had to fuel, and, you know, that didn't trigger a fuel payment from FedEx. So little things like that you can miss very easily if you don't have a system helping you track things.
Yeah. So if you're thinking back, what is the biggest reason that you would point to that you were able to scale from 2 to 42 routes?
So the biggest reason we were able to scale was we were prepared. We, you know, had trucks available, we had drivers available. Whenever FedEx needed something from us, we were, you know, tried to make ourselves available and say, hey, you know, you need trailers moved, you know, we've got a truck, we've got a driver, we can make that happen for you. So I feel like being available and being there was part of a big piece of the growth, because they felt like they could depend on us to get the job done.
Yeah, we kind of had an understanding what FedEx was looking for. So we know what kind of metrics they were looking for. We knew what kind of reporting requirements they were starting to build into the contractor model. So, you know, knowing those things, it's like, okay, the shoe is on their other foot and we were FedEx, we know what they need done and we know what they're measuring. So let's give ourselves the best opportunity to get growth by doing those things.
So we've talked about challenges, we've talked about the things that were hard, but if you're going to look back from the 2 runs to where you guys are today, if you could give something kind of encouraging or the best thing about the FedEx Linehaul network, what would you tell somebody who's looking at this space for the first time?
For us, I mean, it was about flexibility. And, you know, it started as the side hustle, but, you know, we have 2 young kids at home, and I wanted to be able to have that flexibility to where I could go pick them up from school or make myself available during the day to volunteer and things like that. So for me, the FedEx space has, you know, been great in order to be able to have that flexibility. So I'm very grateful for that. Yeah.
I'm grateful to not be in Houston rush hour traffic twice a day.
Yeah.
Going in and out of the
true.
office.
No office hours. Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
That's been like you said, the flexibility has been great, being able to be around more. And, you know, drive our own ship. You know, it's like, okay, well, now we're in full control. Sure, the first year or so was pretty scary.
Yeah.
But, you know, once we got some of those growing pains under our belt and learn more, grew to a place that, you know, we're a little more financially comfortable in the business, and then we could make decisions from there, you know.
All right, and then one of the questions that I always like to ask for when we sit down with interviewing people is just, what is your favorite book or movie? I'll allow you to answer either one, and I'll put you on the spot. See what you say.
I was gonna say, I don't know. Favorite movie? Favorite book?
I'm gonna go with The Other Guys.
Oh, I love that
that's a
movie.
good
Aim for the
one.
bushes.
I can put it on anytime, and it just
Yeah.
puts me in a great mood.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Same favorite movie. That's rare.
Well, yeah, no, that's probably not true, but
That's not fair. You have to
it's.
pick
Well, I feel like we watch a lot more TV than movies.
Okay,
so
I'll allow favorite show.
favorite show. Okay,
Yeah.
so The Office is also a show that we'll put on and just kind of
Repeat watchers.
Yeah,
It's,
just when
it's
you need
ingrained
something.
in your psyche.
Yeah.
You'll watch The Office
Right.
as background noise on any occasion.
Exactly. We
Uh-huh.
even have a Michael Scott quote hanging in our office,
Oh, that's great.
and it's like I knew exactly or I said I knew exactly what to do, but really I had no idea. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of
That's
It fits.
yeah.
it fits.
perfect.
Fits for a FedEx contractor.
Yeah.
Right?
Perfect. Well, Lee, Keely, it was a pleasure having you here, kind of hearing about your story and everything that you guys have built over the years. So thank you for being here, and thank you for kind of sharing all of your success.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been good.
Absolutely.